Oh, we're live. Okay, perfect. Hi, Michael. Welcome to the show today. Welcome to Venture
Thanks,
with
Grace.
Grace today. For the audience who don't know, we are currently now on Apple Podcast, Spotify Podcast. Please give us a 5-star right now. Thank you. Hi, Michael. To give the audience a little bit of your background, uh, I think you have do you want to start with AngelList, or do you want to start with like your other like entrepreneurial journey, including a co-working space in Beijing?
Sure. Okay. So the largest part of my career you already mentioned, which was the time at AngelList. I joined AngelList in late 2012, basically back at the point where AngelList was mostly, we thought of ourselves as a social network, and we were just starting to experiment with adding some transactions on top of all the different connections that people were making on the platform. But as you mentioned before that, I had some other entrepreneurial adventures as well, which kind of led to me being at AngelList. I'd gone to school at MIT, so studied computer science, and then worked at a larger company for about 2 years afterward. And then I found myself in Beijing for personal reasons, and I ended up starting two different sort of entrepreneurial ventures. One was a website where basically an e-commerce website where men could design measure themselves, design their own like dress clothing, and then order it online. I'd produce it with tailors in China and then ship it to them. And then the other one was, because I was doing this tech, like building tech by myself, sort of in Beijing, and I was kind of lonely. I started a Beijing co-working group, and there was no co-working space in Beijing at the time. It was kind of at the beginning of co-working, and so I had a blog and like met some people at some events and started out very simply saying, uh, I'm going to work in coffee shops, so I don't have to be at home all day, every day. And so I'll just send an email out every Sunday saying where I'm going to be. I ended up with about 150 people on that email list, of which 5 or 10 would regularly show up, and then eventually we ended up having a physical location, and it became probably one of the earliest co-working spaces in Beijing. And so there were lots of adventures there, but that led me to eventually to AngelList, because after about 2 years on the e-commerce business, and things weren't working out really the way that I had hoped, I realized a lot of my skills are actually very much engineering, but I need some guidance from people who've been there and done that and been very successful on the business side as well. And so I thought to myself, well, where are the smartest, best entrepreneurs in the world? They're definitely in San Francisco, so I got to move there. So I moved to San Francisco and ended up meeting Naval through the AngelList platform. I was meeting a lot of entrepreneurs and like looking for a team of around 2 to 10 people to join, which actually I do think is a great stage at which to learn and get some opportunities for yourself. And when I had that first kind of coffee meeting with Naval, it was just immediately obvious he's the smartest person I'd spoken to. In interviews with him or conversations with him, you plan out 2 sentences and you only get through one, because he knows where you're going and then jumps in right then. And it was like, okay, this guy knows exactly what I'm going to say, and yet I can't predict what he's going to say, which means he has a lot of very intelligent insight. And so yeah, I ended up joining the AngelList team because everybody on the team was super impressive in the early days, and it was like the one company where I was basically afraid that I'd get fired in 3 months after joining. And I was like, okay, well, I'll definitely learn the most from them. So like, let's jump in and join that team.
I wonder, like, do you feel like it's like a really strong technical team, or like when you say like everybody is super smart, like what does that entail?
Ah, yeah. So for me, and this gets into maybe one of the topics you had suggested for our talk. It gets into like how to build a high performing early stage team. In the
Mm,
early days, AngelList was extremely high performing. The way that they did is they very much focused on often former founders, so
mhm,
people like me, people like some of the other engineers, Kevin Montag, et cetera. Lots of people had started companies before, some of them more successful than others, and but everybody had that motivation, like an internal motivation to go build things.
mhm,
And so, for example, at the time, every Friday, we basically had the social network, which had gotten started with Naval's blog and email list, and yeah, we didn't really know what the business was, but we had a bunch of entrepreneurs, and everyone had to be technical. So everybody had to be able to build things and ship things,
Mhm.
and that cuts down on like the overhead of coordinating with a PM and designer and everything. Everybody can operate very independently and make decision like push decisions down as far as they can go in the organization. And so every Friday, what we do is in the afternoon, turn on the TV in the office, and you'd come over, and
Mhm.
everybody would sit there with their laptops, and you go one after another, and you had to put something up on the screen where you navigate on the live website, and you're like, I shipped this week. And if you didn't have anything that was live to customers, not like in progress, it was kind of embarrassing. So,
Mhm.
so you knew everybody else was shipping really fast and experimenting. And then, of course, over the next couple of weeks, start to get some metrics. You'd start to update, and if things didn't work, you just drop it and you move on to something else. And if things did work, you continue working on it. And so that enabled us to just experiment extremely quickly with a lot of different ideas. And so you can see out of AngelList grew actually a number of businesses, which is just a tiny percentage of the number of businesses that we launched. But AngelList Venture now is a huge business, $16.67 billion under management. AngelList Talent has split out and become WellFound. CoinList split out of AngelList, so did Republic, and then we sort of brought product in, and now it's kind of spun out into its own thing again. But it was very much a place where we were thinking about, we were all independently thinking about who are our customers, what are the problems they want to solve, and how can we solve them really really quickly. And we were each individually empowered to go build that really fast. And so like you could build anything, but you had to be able to you ultimately had to be able to defend it to Naval and to our other co-founder, Babak Nivi. um, and they had really high judgment, and so Nivi was tough. He'd like come over
Mhm.
to your desk and surprise you behind the scenes and be like, you know, what's this crap you just launched on our website? And if you're overly intimidated, uh, it wasn't so good. But really, all he was asking in his own way is like, explain to me your thought process behind this. And if you actually did have a thought process, even if he disagreed with it and it was like logical and made sense, say, okay, well, let's see how it goes. But if it didn't make sense and he thought you weren't thinking deeply about what you were shipping, uh, he wouldn't stop giving you crap about it, and you'd
Mhm.
have to go change something.
Yeah, from my experience, basically like being a, I guess like a test rabbit or something for like
Yeah.
the product of Quill. Like I feel like um I think you guys are very great at like iteration. So like and then
Mm.
you are really like kind of like very hands-on when it comes to like solving customer problems. And like I just thought it was like really impressive. And then each time, like, even just like couple weeks of time, like you guys will launch like something new or like constantly like improving the features, which I thought was like very like just like very great to see as a customer or like just like a tester or something. um I thought like I wanted to ask you, like, can you formulating it into like a system, like you mentioned some really great things. So there's like, I guess, like three things that you just mentioned.
Mm.
Like one is like each person will bring in their own kind of like product idea to the team, and Naval and like two other influential people in the company will be like providing feedback ish
Yeah.
or like guidance or something. And then people will have the ability to go after the product they feel like it's working, right? And then eventually, you mentioned as a result, people may have like a different really strong spin-off, right? Like Republic, it's already a
Exactly.
billion-dollar company and stuff like that. Um, I wonder, I think like Angelus, like by just going to Angelus events, I feel like the people are very high caliber, and like by high caliber, I mean like they're very entrepreneurial. Than compared to a lot of companies, they have amazing, let's say, engineers or amazing like scientists or something. But like I feel
Hmm.
like everybody in Angeles seems like super hands on, so they have built something, and which I felt like the culture were like really interesting. And then they were also kind of to a degree their own user as well, because they are all founders. So at one point, they probably have to encounter like a product similar to Angelus to manage either their cap table or their investment to a degree.
Hmm.
I wonder, how does this apply into, let's say, you and I start an AI company. what should be the process look like to turn a particular technical mode into like a product that people would want to use? Like, let's say if you and I are building like a chat GPT equivalent for, I don't know, a specific sector of people, like
Hmm.
ChatGPT equivalent for artists. How should we go about testing this idea? Let's say we have some sort of like foundational model going on, like just like we have
Yeah.
the technical part. Right now, how do we figure out like who is the artist we should serve? Let's say, should we serve like the Hollywood celebrities? Should we serve the influencers? Should we serve like, marketing team at big companies and like to implement our like ChatGPT function to them? Or how would you go about creating a product?
Yeah. So the way I go about creating a product is you have to build up a lot of user empathy first and excitement about the problem. Your products can shift a lot. So a lot of times it does come down to can you empathize with these users? For me, I would find it very hard to build something for a demographic I totally don't understand because you do have to do a lot of research at that point. And at AngelList, what it pushed me to do is actually the opposite, to like better understand my users, as I realized what I was building was more and more for angel investors and helping them leverage up into becoming fund managers. I also started doing angel investing probably earlier in like my net worth journey than I might recommend to most people. And
Mhm,
so
mhm,
but I really wanted to use our product, and so I started angel investing in some companies, following some syndicates, making some LP investments, etc. Because to me, like if you push your decision making all the way down to the engineer that's building the product, like we were talking about before, which enables you to go fast, what it requires is it does require that engineer to have good judgment about what to build and how to build it. And so that can come in a couple of ways. One is by being a user yourself. One is by talking to people a lot, just all the time. And so I highly encouraged at the time all of our engineers, like all of our engineers did the support, and we rotated our customer support email through the engineers and stuff, and just so that as long as possible we could keep the people building the product just in touch with the people using the product, because the engineers have to be prioritizing themselves, and like it cuts out this big loop where you have a PM go research something, write it down, come back, and that written version of it is never quite the same as what the customer actually said or actually felt. And then you try to explain it to somebody else, and there are advantages to that in like numbers and statistics and stuff, but the
mhm,
gut feeling for your customers you don't quite get. The other thing you were talking about though is like ChatGPT for artists. So you have to have some empathy for artists and some empathy for the problem that
mhm,
you're trying to solve for them. Um, and so you can get that through being an artist, you can get that through talking to them a lot. But both of those have a downside, which is if you're just talking or just thinking, and like thinking in your head and maybe even drawing on a whiteboard or something is not the same as
mhm,
getting something in their hands that will solve 1% of their problem. And what you try to do is you try to build the most basic thing that works, and you get it to at least one person who wants to use it, and then
mhm,
you start getting feedback. And at AngelList we called this low inventory, meaning
mhm,
don't don't be building a feature for 3 months that you can't release until it's completely done. Try to get it out as fast as possible. Don't work on multiple things at once, because some of them are going to get delayed and stuff. Like work on one, get it out, work on the next one, get it out. Because people will tell you, like an artist might tell you their problem is, I don't know, maybe they aren't sure which AI models have been trained on their data or something, on their pieces of art. And like they might tell you that, but is that there's no solution in there. You have to start proposing stuff, and people are not good at predicting how they'll actually react to a product until they actually play with it or see it. um,
mhm,
People, I guess it goes back to Henry Ford, right? Like he said if you ask
mhm,
people what they want a faster horse, but instead he built them a car. And it's a
mhm,
completely different product, but it solves their underlying need of like getting from A to B. And so these days, one of the wonderful things about software is you can build that very first version of the car. You can build it much more cheaply, smaller numbers of people. It's just a software product. And you, like with AI, I highly encourage most companies not to build foundational models themselves, and instead prototype on top of GPT-4 or these days Mistral just showed up. Pick an AI provider, and it might be more expensive and it may not be specialized to your use case, but you can prototype solving the user's problem with these other models. And then if you have a real problem and you have the UX in which a user really wants to spend time, then you can make your economics better and you can make the performance better and you can iterate on like behind the scenes stuff. But the highest order bit is always, are you actually solving a problem for users?
From your perspective, I feel like you're really great like at like building your own product because you guys are constantly testing as well as like, I think you do it really well on as like, working on one product and get it out and then working on the second feature or something. But I wonder, like, since you went to MIT, I'm sure there's a lot of your friends who have very strong technical mode. Compared to the people who actually succeed at building a particular product versus the people who have strong technical background but like never successfully built a good product. What's the difference between these two type of like technical talent?
I mean, they're both useful. So an analogy that I've heard in the past for when you're recruiting, for example, is like you want, imagine you have it's kind of a military analogy, but you've got guns, right? And so guns have multiple parts. They have the barrels and they have the bullets, and the bullets can go really fast in one direction, but the barrel can like decide where to point, and what to work on. And the number of different things your business can do is ultimately limited by the number of barrels you have, not by the number of bullets you have. And so early stage, you want more and more people that are pretty general but can like shift direction as you get customer feedback. But once you find out you have a nice direction, like you have a strong hypothesis somewhere, you can get like the best bullets you're interested in, like the people that can go super deep, super fast, and just make your product work really, really well once you know that you're aimed in the right direction. And so I think they both have their place. I do actually think, though, they're we've seen the success of OpenAI, and in general, like right now is a decent time to be investing in longer term technical bets, but it is a very different kind of bet. My personality is more suited to the let's get product out, let's iterate very fast. But some people are just they know the space, or they have a super strong technical vision that cannot be realized without a longer term investment in R&D and capital up front. And so sometimes that's what it takes to get a product that's 10x better than anything else. And so there are different kinds of angel investors and different kinds of VC investors that will invest in different kinds of entrepreneurs as well. I just personally, I think that there's still so much value in like the fast product version, and that the number of people that can really be successful at the other one is that if I'm making a bet with my time, I'm probably going towards building product. But somebody who is a top 10 machine learning researcher in the world and knows exactly why OpenAI hasn't yet built GPT-5 and like what they should do instead. I mean, that person's probably way more valuable raising $100 million and going and training GPT-5.
I wonder when let's talk about like, you're building a product for like angel investor to turn them into like fund managers, right? What's the difference between angel investor and fund manager? Besides like, obviously angel investor invests in their own money and like fund manager have to portfolio manage and dealing with LPs and everything. So can you quickly walk us through like from your perspective, successful angel investor turn fund manager? And I've seen a lot of people start syndicate first or rolling funds. Since you are the person who's on the team who builds these products, can you kind of give us a quick overview on how does the journey like turning angel investor to fund manager, and what you see as like successful examples?
Yeah, so successful examples are people like Zach Coilis, who I think you had
Ooh.
on your show.
Yeah.
Elon Gill is now, of course, manages huge amounts of money, starting as an
Oh, yeah.
angel. Lesser known ones are Tommy Leap, who is running he's in his first time full scale venture fund, solo fund. He had been doing a bunch of syndicates, and before that, he was advising and investing in startups as an angel. And he's had an interesting journey. He's kind of newer on the scene. But even back in the day, we had Samuel Shaw was running syndicates, and now he's on what, Fund 4 at Haystack. So lots of people have gone through this journey, and some people get to different stages, and they like different stages of it. As an angel, you have ultimate flexibility. You're not telling anyone up front what your investment strategy is, so nobody's going to question it. You don't have to worry so much, and so you can really be led totally by your passion for working with particular entrepreneurs, and you can find the people that you like spending time with, and you can put money behind them. Now the downside is you're putting in a lot of work for small dollar amounts, and so you kind of have to love it. But some of the greatest investors out there are essentially just angels, because you can take a risk on anybody, and those risks sometimes are the ones that pay off in like a power law sort of way, that they go up 10,000x or something because nobody else saw it, and you put some money in that company actually did well. And so entrepreneurs love angels. They get a lot of personal interaction with angels. Once you become a fund manager, there's a lot of other stuff that starts to come into play because you're starting to raise money from other capital sources. So you have to actually have know people with money, be able to convince them to give you money, and then when they give you money, you have to be a good steward of that, of course, as well. And so you have to set expectations very clearly, what you're going to do. And you should probably think a bit more from a portfolio perspective, especially because LPs themselves especially the bigger like family offices and institutions, they're thinking about their own portfolio construction. They're thinking, I have 2% to invest of my entire portfolio to invest in venture, of which I should probably have some early stage. I should be cross-sector. I should be across timelines. And so you're like fitting into a slot in their investment. So if you say, so Tommy raised a climate tech fund, Jetstream .io, and he's great. Like he sends out an investor update every month with some thoughts on new area of the ecosystem. He talks to his portfolio founders. He's also a very social person. He's always meeting with LPs and the founders, and like he sends these great photos of him visiting people and with his little baby who's super cute and all this stuff, and it like makes you have a personal feeling with him. But what he doesn't do is he doesn't go and take 200K from his fund and invest into he doesn't invest in an OpenAI secondary, because that's not what the LPs ask him to do. It might be a good investment, it might be a great deal, but you don't do that with your LP money, because if they want to invest in OpenAI secondary, they have other path to do that. They invest in you because they want the climate tech investment, and they want an early stage primary portfolio out of your fund. And so you have to be conscious of stuff like that, and it just like becomes a lot more formalized. So one of the things that I thought about at AngelList is like the difference between an angel and running a fund used to be a step function. The minimum fund size you could raise would probably be 30 plus million, just to make the economics start to work, where you put together a small team, you have enough to pay your back office, your lawyers, etc. And so going from not raising any money ever to raising $30 million is a step too far for a lot of people. But instead, with syndicates and with rolling funds and micro funds, like you can start at zero and you can raise your first 100K, and you can pick a company that you're investing in. The founder, like they really want you involved because you've been a great angel, whatever it is, and they make a 100K allocation for you, even though the round is being led by A16Z. And A16Z has enough money, they could take the whole round, but the founder really wants you in there, and you only have 10K. So now you take your 90K and you go raise your very first syndicate for it. And 90K is small enough that you can raise money from your friends, depending on who you are. You could go raise money from the LPs that are already on AngelList. Like if it's a good deal and AngelList approves it to be shared with more LPs, you can start to pick some LPs to invest. And now suddenly you have 100K invested as a professional fund manager, but you didn't have to go raise 30 million before you know what company. It's much easier to raise when you say, I know that I'm going to invest in this specific company. Here's why it's good. You can make your own decision whether or not you know me or trust me. But you
Um,
do that 10 times. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I have a
Yeah,
question for
I'm
that.
in your.
So
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of like bigger syndicates out there
Mm.
because if you're a first time person trying to start a deal or whatever, I think it's really hard to have the conviction because you've never done this before, and then if you pick the wrong deal, which happens like 9 out of 10 times, quote unquote, like not like it doesn't have to happen all the time, but like my general point is like startup fail more than they succeed, right? So let's say you get your friends and family or people who may not be the institutional LPs to like be our syndicate backer. And what if this first deal like goes down? And then what's a benefit or like challenges if you join like a bigger syndicate? Let's say there are some top syndicate have like thousands of LPs, right? But they may not be super active. Even there,
Hmm.
if they're active, they belong to other fund managers. And like, how do you build a track record if you join them as like, maybe you write all the deal memos and these people will take it to their LPs. Of course, that's like a plus for you. So you got some sort of exposure to the LP group. However, this is not your own syndicate. Would you say like if a person is trying to build track record, they should start their own syndicate? Or should they join like a bigger syndicate as like a person who, like who
It's
will
a
get carry deal memo, stuff like that?
Yeah, it's kind of like, do you go become an associate at a VC firm? Um, but yeah, the syndicate ecosystem has evolved a lot from 10 years ago. Um, so yes, there are some bigger syndicates that are multiple people now, and like those syndicate leads really enjoy running syndicates versus many of them with 1,000+ backers could probably go raise a fund. But
Mhm.
like for some of them, they actually like the syndicate option. It's a little less, long-term pressure, and it works well for them. I'd say I'd say as soon as possible, have your own syndicate, even if the deal size is smaller. But if that's not possible, like this is one more path to start to understand what exactly is involved in the work and get some capital going into something with your name. The whole thing is building a track record and getting more and more people used to spending a dollar and investing a dollar based on based on you. So the better the more times, for example, maybe you're an associate at a syndicate and you source and write up memos on 3 deals, and you get and some of the backers start to see your name in the deals, and then eventually you say, I'm running my own syndicate, and you talk to that syndicate lead who you have a good relationship with now. You've run 3 deals for them and like help them make some money as well, and find some great founders to invest in. You say, I want to start my own syndicate, and can I tell your backers that I'm starting and this is my first deal? And then you sort of
Mhm.
you could maybe switch it from you getting a slice of carry on their syndicate to you running your syndicate, and you give them a slice of carry for advising you because they're elder and they're like more experienced, and you're still learning from them. But eventually you're going to have your own syndicate, and then you're going to have your own rolling fund, and then you're going to have your own fund. And so syndicates, one other thing warning about syndicates is they are harder to run than a fund. Once you have a fund, it's much easier to make investments from that fund. You're a little bit back more towards the direction of you have your own control over your capital.
Mhm.
This is a mistake that a lot of people think. They think syndicates are super easy and you like blast out an email and you get money. But it's actually harder because the reason you have a syndicate, the reason the LPs want to invest in your syndicate is because they don't fully trust you yet. So it's actually in some ways like having a bunch of people second guessing every investment you make. And so it makes you go a little bit slower. You have to convince them on every single investment and explain why this is great. This is like a great team that you want to put some money behind and everything. So it and so the bar for a company and an investor being able to raise a syndicate is actually pretty high. But it is part of the work that a lot of people do to become uh, fund managers. An alternative path is certainly go be an associate in a VC fund, work there for 5 years, and then like your GP knows and trusts you, and then you leave. And at that point, of course, you should have some relationships with founders who've exited and like various people in the ecosystem who want to be investing more and like trust you and go raise a first fund that way. But either way, like you have to build experience in the business in order to really scale up.
I wonder what's your thought on like so also like I'm curious like how do people legally promote their own syndicate on their social media platform?
Mm,
So what I've heard is like you can promote your syndicate, but you can't promote specific deals, right?
that's right.
So
That's right.
how like what have you seen as like, successful people with like a big following or some sort of like decent sized following to done this? I have some observations, but like I feel
Mm.
like maybe people are doing yeah, like I think I don't really know what is like the most uh I guess like most like thoughtful or um like successful approach in this category of things.
Um, yeah. So, like you said, generally you can't promote a specific deal, and they're both legal and kind of game theory reasons why you don't do that. Um, I'll talk about the game theory reason first, which is let's go back to that example of an entrepreneur who has a super hot round. They've chosen A16 to lead it, but they cut out 100K because they really think you're going to add a lot of value and like you have a good relationship with that founder.
Mhm.
Um, if they're in stealth mode, they don't want you to go announce that they're fundraising. They don't want to do that themselves. They want to control when people know about the company, et cetera. So if you go on your Twitter and you say, I'm investing in company X, and here's all their internal metrics, here's why it's great, come join me if you want. At that point, you're not going to be allowed to invest anymore. The founder actually will be super mad at you. And so that's one of the big that's like the underlying reason. Then the legal reason is because you have to know that people are accredited investors before you start to invest, before you start to invite them to invest. And there's this whole like 506C versus 506B sort of regulation. And so what's best to do is to build like promote your syndicate, and um, you say to your followers, if you have some brand, you say, I'm starting to invest in companies. If you want to see the companies that I'm investing in, go to AngelList and sign up for my syndicate. And AngelList will say, well, when they sign up, it will like do the accreditation checks and everything and make sure that they're legally allowed to be in your syndicate. And then you've got a much narrower, more focused set of people who said, yes, they're very interested in potentially investing. They want to see what you're investing in. So they've like self-selected to people who are interested in there. And you've double checked that legally you're not going to cross over that 506C, 506B line and be blasting out to accredited investors. And so that helps with both the legal side and the game theory side, where that founder who doesn't want too much information to be spread out is not going out to 10,000 people on Twitter. It's going out to the 50 people that signed up for your syndicate to start with. And also like you should still be careful about even those 50 people, depending on what the founder wants. So you see some syndicates at the extreme, they don't give very much information about particular companies because ultimately you're respecting the founder's wishes, and like that's why you're able to invest in this great company. Um, but then other times companies, especially companies maybe that want to be seen by a lot of company potential customers, or like they're recruiting, they want to be seen by a lot of people with technical backgrounds and networks, like they may be much more comfortable sharing a lot more information. um, so there's a range, but that is part of why running a syndicate is hard, because you're balancing all these different people, and there's a timeline, of course, because that hot company will be saying, well, I saved 100K for you, but are you going to invest or are you not going to invest? Are you going to invest and you're not going to invest? And you want to give them an answer sooner rather than later. And so you're like balancing all this
Mhm.
stuff.
What is there a template for this or like is there some sort of like timeline? Like let's say um if I have like 100K allocation of a company and like go like not me, but like let's say if an
Hmm.
audience have like 100K allocation for a company and they wanted to like close it within I don't know, like what is a good time frame for them to close it to make it not look like it's bad or something? Because we definitely don't want to be like, oh, let's like do a month of due diligence and
So yeah, so it's been changing. It changes quite a bit with the with the environment right now. Early stage fundraising outside of AI is very slow and hard, and so actually the number of successful syndicates has decreased significantly from probably the peak in 2021 or so. And so, the timeline changes, and so that also changes how much pressure the founders give you. But oftentimes the goal is to get into the companies that have more than enough funding, like chasing them. And so that's hard to do. And so the faster you can get the commitments, the better. I'd say the legal commitment is the main thing. So there's time to collect the money. If all the people in your syndicate come in 2 days and they sign and say, I will definitely invest. So you get 20 people investing 10K each, and you've got 200K lined up. Generally, that money will show up. It's rare that it doesn't show up, and so you can go back and you can say, all right, well, I have 20K. I'll go ahead and like get the docs signed, but we're waiting for the money to come in. And then you wait 4 days or a week for the wires and the ACHs and stuff to show up. And that's not too bad. And so, yeah, it's so strange. Some of the syndicates would fill up in 30 minutes, and some of them would fill up in 4 weeks. But I'd say once you start going over 4 weeks, it starts to really feel like this is taking a long time. Even 2 weeks is kind of, if it fills up in fast in 2 weeks, then it's definitely happening. There are other ways to do it. Like the minimum on AngelList, at least when I was there, was 80K to close a syndicate. I'm not 100% sure what it is today. So we would have like the AngelList Access Fund and some larger LPs that you could go to, and you could talk to them, and they would make fast decisions. So like if they commit and you get to your 80K minimum day one, you can still go to the founder and say, hey, I definitely am investing. I already have 80K lined up, but give me a couple more days to talk to everybody else. And then the individuals that may not be as on top of their AngelList email and stuff, like kind of filter in, you figure out exactly how much you have, but you know that it's going to happen. The biggest fear is you spend 3 weeks and you only get to 40K, and then you can't close the syndicate because it barely has enough to cover the cost ratio to that would be too high. And so like you don't want to close the syndicate, and then you have to go back to the founder and say, I made you wait, but I'm not going to invest, and that's not great. So you try to get over the minimum bar as soon as possible, so you can be more confident that no matter what, you're going to be investing in this company. And then you try to then you wait a little bit to see how big you can get it.
Is there a formula for like running this conversation with your crew, right? Like, so let's say I have like 50 people subscribe to, not me, but like, okay, so let's say the audience have like 50K subscribed, 50 people subscribe to their audience, like I guess like syndicate list, right? So, and then do you share every single deal with everyone on this, or like you just selectively share some? Because some people may just subscribe to it and then like subscribe to it as a newsletter, like they just never invest, right?
Yeah.
Or let's say some active, like how do you kind of like go about like I would
So
remove
yeah,
like 5 people
strategies
that.
differ, but you can see on your LP list in AngelList how many deals they've been invited to versus how many they've invested in. And in fact, when LP applies to your syndicate, if they have an AngelList account, you can see overall at AngelList they've been invited to 1,000 deals and they've only ever invested in one, or they've been invited to 10 deals and they've invested in 8. Most people are like 80% conversion rate would be too high for anybody on AngelList because you get but you know what I'm saying. You can see a difference. And so generally for me, I would say if somebody has never invested on AngelList before and they get up to 100 deals or something that they're invited to across AngelList, I'd be skeptical about sending them more information, and I'd probably kick them out. In my individual syndicate, I might invite somebody new to 3 deals, and then if they don't invest in the first 3, I'm not sure they're really serious about it unless I know them personally, and maybe there's a reason they didn't invest in those 3. But I know that I'm more conscientious about that than a lot of syndicate leads. Some syndicate leads, it's too much effort, so they invite everybody, and other syndicate leads like won't even let people follow their syndicates until they personally invite them, and they just get a super tiny group. There are actually a lot of people using AngelList to run SPVs with their existing LPs in their fund. when when an opportunity doesn't match the thesis, or it's a follow-on or something. And so like they never invite the people that show up and ask to follow them on AngelList. They only invite their 10 LPs from their private fund or something. So the goal is to try to be flexible, but give some transparency so you can make that decision.
If like a fund manager asks you, like if like a existing like big like syndicate group or something say,
Mhm.
hey, like we can collab with you or something, but like assuming the smaller fund have to do like all the work, right? So like I guess like how do you know if any of these opportunity would be like worth your time, and then how do you kind of like evaluate like the collaboration opportunities that comes at you?
Well, I think about obviously you can think about the money, and you can think about like, well, what's the amount of carried interest that I'd be able to share with this larger fund manager if I work with them on this deal. And you should both be doing some work. Like ultimately, it is that larger fund manager investing in the company, so they should be confident in the company and excited about it as well. But if it's an apprenticeship and you're like paying for experience, essentially, it it's like again, it's actually somewhat similar. If you go to a venture fund, you become an associate. You don't make the big bucks that the partner makes, but you do a lot of the work, and that's how you learn how to be an investor. And so it might depend on each individual one, and you should like work with people that you respect all the time that you can learn from. If they're literally doing nothing, probably not a great idea. But if it could, but I see different strategies. So very early days, I remember Semel Shaw ran a couple of syndicates with 0% carry, and like he's a great investor, but he was testing it out and like getting his feet, feet wet. And inside Angels, we were kind of surprised he was running deals with 0% carry and essentially doing work and then letting LPs invest for free alongside the work that he was doing. But it got everything started. And so, and I'm pretty sure it was Semel Shaw. I just want to double check because that was 10 years ago, 10 plus years ago. Yeah, anyway, but like I said, some people start with zero carry, zero fees, and just do it for free essentially. But you build a track record, you build people you get the experience, you've written a couple memos, and then your fourth deal or your fifth deal, you can like point to, hey, my previous deals were these ones and they're doing okay. Or even if it's a little bit early, it's only a couple years in, you can't quite say that they've gotten a lot of write-ups, but you can still say, here's some evidence of like the types of thinking, the types of deals that I can invest in. So would you like to follow me and potentially like see my next deal?
I have like 3 questions there. One is like, how do you fact check the manager's like performance? Because I've
Mm-hmm.
seen a lot of people that are like very popular on social media, but like, how do you kind of like fact check if like their deals are kind of legit? And number 2 is like, you've seen a lot of like amazing managers. How do they win deals that's with, a Sequoia or a 16Z or something on the cap
Mm-hmm.
table? And number 3 is like, we could talk about like writing deal memos. Like, what's your suggestion on like quickly write it, or like if there's any sort of template, we could talk about Quill at this point. But
Yeah.
anyway, please.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll quickly go through all three questions. Let's see. So how do they win deals? You have to have a strategy for winning deals. Um, and the way I think about investing in general in the
Mhm.
private markets is you have to have in order deal flow, access, judgment, and capital. So deal flow means you just have to even hear about good deals before they get filled up and they're gone. So if the founder never even comes and talks to you, or you're not in like the gossip network essentially, where you're hearing about companies that are raising, you'll never have the opportunity to even invest in them. You can't exercise judgment on something you've never heard about. And then you have to have access. So that founder has to accept your capital. And then finally, you have judgment. And so, so different people have different strategies. The social media one is actually pretty decent. If you have a lot of followers on social media, um, you know, people are interested in being associated with you when
Mhm.
you're known as smart or famous or connected. Um, you can also kind of just leverage the connected piece, and people want to be associated with you because they know that you're going to make great introductions to the rest of your network. you might have some super deep technical expertise and just be really, really good at that. And so it's a lot of you might have I've known angel investors who've explicitly taken jobs at like the top tech companies at the time, even after they had enough money to retire and just be investors, because they're like, oh, I can be a VP of Facebook, and whenever somebody tells me they're quitting Facebook to start their own company, I can invest in them. And so different strategies. You can also be very industry focused and like be writing pieces about the company types of companies you should think should be out in the world. You can tell everybody, hey, there should be a company doing this. Going back to, actually, this brings me back to Tommy again, because I just realized he's doing this. Yesterday or 2 days ago when I saw him, he told me he's thinking about, in terms of climate change, there are a lot of companies thinking about like what helps long term, but there are a lot of emergencies happening. Over the last couple of weeks, we've had some crazy hot temperatures in the US for February, parts of Texas over 100 degrees, and very few startups are figuring out how do you go in when there's a climate emergency and just like immediately help on the ground. And so I know that. I know he's looking for this sort of company, and he's kind of like laying a trap out in the world, and he's like telling everybody he's looking for this thing. If I meet an entrepreneur who's thinking about that area, I will think of Tommy and I'll send them over there. So you can also like be proactive about saying, hey, these are the sorts of things I'm looking for, and then those entrepreneurs may hear about it or like come find you. I believe actually Naval used this strategy when he invested in Twitter, because I think he was posting about like short term. I mean, this was before my time, but I just remember hearing the story from him. He was posting about like social media and short-term social media and all this stuff. And like the founders of Twitter wanted him involved in their company. So they came and found him and got him started in angel investing. And it wasn't the other way around, him going out and finding the company first.
But
So
I
lots of
feel
different
like
strategies.
I feel like the winning deal part, like you mentioned, there's two
Hmm.
parts, right? Like one's like, let's say the person posts about blah, this is like a specific product I want. But I kind of feel like you have to be like the industry expert. Like people would want Naval on their cap table is because when he's like a really successful entrepreneur, right? Like a lot of the younger
But
fund managers,
not
they
when he was getting started. I mean, he was an entrepreneur, but you don't have to necessarily be the best entrepreneur, but you do have to be intelligent enough and like thinking about the same things as the entrepreneurs, so they're interested in getting your opinion and your thoughts.
um the other quick question is like I feel like you've seen a lot of people running these um like I guess like people who are bringing deal onto AngelList, and then do you think there need to be some sort of like leading um big logo fund on top of their
Mm.
companies to be successful? And
It
versus like, let's say you have worked in blah 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 industry and you invest in this company, but there's like absolutely no like other facts that I could personally check. This is like a
Yeah, it often helps, and there's a couple of reasons. One is the reputation. People think about signaling in venture all the time. Signaling is essentially trying to understand what an actor really means versus what they say.
Mhm.
Um, For example, a very clear example, if you ask a venture fund to invest in your company and they say no, but they can introduce you to someone they think might be a better fit, and they introduce you to another venture fund, which is not clearly enough differentiated from your own fund, there's this weird signal where the new fund says, yeah, great, they're saying nice things about you, but they didn't invest. If you were really that good, they would have put some money in. And so people do think about signaling a lot, and so one of the reasons is that this works well is that there is strong signal. A large investor with uh, a long-term track record, you can kind of borrow their track record when you're starting your syndicate. The other reason is because one of the big failure modes, probably especially for newer angels, is to invest in a company that isn't going to complete their round for some reason, or they're not going to raise enough money to make it 18 or 24 months until they can raise their next round. And so even if you totally believe in a company and you believe in the entrepreneurs, but you end up being the only person to put in 100K, and they hire an engineer and then spend 100K in 3 months and they're out of business, like you've made a poor decision. And so you also, as an investor, have to be thinking about, is this company attractive to other investors? Will it be able to get to a point in 18 months that will be attractive to Series A investors or Series B investors, like the next round investors? And so, I mean, the best feeling in venture is when you believe in something that nobody else does, and like those people go on to change the world. That's amazing, and you've really helped them out. But from a financial perspective, and like actually from having a real impact on the world perspective, you do have to think about what other people are want to invest in, what they're playing with. So so the LPs that might invest in your syndicate are also thinking about that. And they're one of their questions, which should be on everybody's investment checklist, is like, will this company raise enough money to survive long enough to prove out their thesis, yes or no? And so they want to see that there's other money going into the round. They're not the only check-in.
I have a question on this. So, like, there are so many angel funds, but you always hear about the saying of like, there's only 10 companies that matter each year. And
Yeah.
like, is there any economic incentive if the company isn't becoming like a Uber or something?
Um, I mean, the thing is, there are only 10 companies that matter each year. Doesn't mean there are only 10 investable companies each year, because you don't know which ones are going to matter until a few years later. Sometimes many years later. Uber was on AngelList as well. This was very early before AngelList did the syndicates, and so we didn't get any carry, unfortunately. But
Mhm.
when they were on AngelList, their deal memo said they've just started doing 10 rides per weekend, so that's like 5 rides per day. And they were at a $4 million valuation, and they had an advisor, Travis Kalanick, who I believe hadn't fully committed to be CEO at the time. So it was super early. And so that got sent out via email to 35 potential investors. 7 of them invested. The other 35, the other 28 of them are probably kicking themselves. So like you can't tell at that time. Would you have known that that's going to become a $50 billion plus company? It's really hard to tell versus all the other companies that were in the same batch of emails or even the same month. And so it's more about like, does this company you're looking at have, is there a possible world in which it is one of those 10 companies that matter that year?
So basically, it's like a expensive version of like a lottery-ish thing.
Yes, but because of the outcome distribution, it can be expectation positive that you can make money, venture and angel investing, but you need to make sure you have the right distribution of startups that you're looking at. But it's definitely a lottery ticket, and there's definitely a long-term period in which, even had you invested in Uber's seed round, you've got 10 years until you see that money again, and you're like thinking maybe it's worth something someday, but anything could happen. It could just go to zero right before IPO, or immediately after IPO, or whatever. So it's definitely a bit of a lottery ticket. And so the earliest investors, I do think the good ones would do it anyway. They just love working with entrepreneurs and meetings meeting people working on interesting problems.
What does the exit look like for people who invest on AngelList? So is there anyone like who I mean, like, what is a so for example, if a company got bought by another company,
Mm.
um, how's the money split it to people? Is that like automatically like by that I mean like do well not I but like let's say if someone who's running a AngelList syndicate and do people just like automatically receive their portion of the shares or like do you have to personally be like DMing everybody on every decision whatsoever?
No, Angels does all the back office. And so what that means is there's a bank account for your SPV, which is a mini fund. When there's an exit, we'll do the simple version where you get cash for an exit rather than shares and stuff. But that's all also handled. But like, say your syndicate has invested $100,000. It in 8 years the company's acquired and you get $1 million back. Angels knows that 20% of the carry probably goes to the lead. So that's 200K to the lead, and then there's 800K to be split among all the LPs, which is just split by the percentage that they own of your fund, which is how much they put in. And so each of them essentially gets money put into their own AngelList account. So you've got 10 LPs, so everybody has 10%, so they all get 80K put in their AngelList account, and then they get their email saying, "Hey, you've received a new distribution. You can withdraw to your bank account. You can reinvest. You can do whatever you want. It's like in your account." And so that's one of the nice things about using AngelList. It's all just covered in there.
Um, okay, let's talk about like writing deal memos. Do you want to talk about Quill first?
Yeah. So these days I'm working on a company called Quill, still in private beta, but I'm very excited about AI providing leverage to humans. And like, I think Grace, you and we mentioned a phrase yesterday, like AI should make people more human. So it should take out more and more of the grunt work and like leave you to be making your decisions and your judgments and deciding what to do. And then AI can help you on actually executing stuff. And so one of the nice things that Quill does is it's basically this personal post-meeting productivity tool. It takes information from your meetings, helps you create documents, eventually helps you take the next steps in your workflow. So during the meeting, you can very much concentrate on being in person with somebody, asking the questions you want, answering, having this really creative brainstorm that goes all over the place, and then you can reorganize your information afterward. And so yeah, we have actually a fair number of VCs creating internal investment memos with Quill, where they go talk to the founders, and then their meetings kind of come back it gets organized in a way that's easy to share. Yesterday, spoke with one of our customers who was taking our default investment memo template and customizing it for their firm. And so he was adding essentially a timeline of like, one of the things they like to look at is how is this founder, what have they done in the past, and how have they made decisions about their own life. And so he wanted a section there about a timeline. And so yeah, in Quill, you can have a template, and after your meeting, or maybe for a thread, you can say of various meetings, you can say, here's what I want to come out with it. And so we helped him customize his own template so that in his meetings, as he's asking all these questions, afterward, he can write up a nice internal memo, which includes not only what does the company do, what's their competition, what's the current fundraising status, what's unique about their technology. Like some of those are the defaults, but also for him, what's the founder's timeline, and at each step in their timeline, what was their motivation for making the changes that they did. And so Quill is very, very customized because, again, it gets back to this leverage idea that a human knows what they want out of the meeting. They know what they want to communicate to each other, and then the AI just helps you take your creative session and say, all right, well, I want this one perspective on the meeting for internal, and I want a different perspective for external people, etc.
Do you guys can you guys make a template for like deal memos so people don't have to
Yeah,
like their own stuff?
we do have one.
Wait, let me check. I have not.
Okay.
I've been just like going to my own
Yeah,
template for years.
it's called the startup meeting template, and I actually think we maybe could improve it, because I had a template when I was more active running a syndicate. I did have a template for like the syndicate deal memos that I wrote up, but it's actually pretty similar to the meeting with startup template if you look at templates in Quill.
Okay.
So that one covers, intro, what do they do, who it's for, details, fundraising status, traction, team,
Mhm.
key risks, competition, and then some general notes on unique topics for this specific company, which is basically what you'd want in a syndicate note, because people want to know, like we talked about quite a bit, who else is investing in the company? Are they raising enough? You want to know about traction. Are they growing? Are they going fast? And is that a reason to invest? Is the team an amazing reason to invest? And in general, like, what does this company do? For
Mhm.
a syndicate note, I might also add a bit more about the market, because you're going to want to think about, is this market big enough to support a multi-billion-dollar company? Is it a growing market? Is it a shrinking market? Like, what is it? And then, we've got competition in there, and then key risks. Of course, you do need to think about like what can go wrong for this company. So this is a pretty good. Honestly, if you wrote up just this yourself manually about a company and put it as a deal memo on AngelList, it would be totally fine.
Okay. Um, Another quick question before we wrap up is like, you have oh, by the way, like everyone should definitely try out Quill meetings. And anyway, maybe I should like have like a coupon code or something for Grace listeners. But anyway,
Yeah.
so for like you have also worked with Nival. Do you want to share a little bit more about like um you already shared a little bit about like, the early days of AngelList
Mm.
and I guess like what do you think are like, let's say, three biggest things that you've learned from him? Obviously he was super kind and like uh I
Yeah.
manually typed in Smart Venture podcast into his phone. But anyway, so I'm like very, very
Mm.
just like, yeah, I don't know. Like I'm a big fan of him. But anyway, sorry.
Uh, yeah, it's okay. So let me think about three things I've learned from Naval, because there's so much. It's like one of the things that you can tell about his genius is that I've tried to learn as much as I can from him, and yet when I go talk to him about some perspective I have on a problem or something, he always comes back with a new one, and I'm like, that's so obvious, but still, I didn't predict exactly what he was going to say. So he's always thinking very high level about whatever industry he's focused on. He's like always thinking about it. So a couple things come to mind, like how does he bootstrap his knowledge on markets and trends so much? One investment suggestion I heard him talk about at one point was like, if there's a new market, sometimes your first couple investments, assuming you have enough money to make multiple investments, can be in just the smartest like PhD dropouts who are starting companies now, or like just the people who are super deep into this market. If you invest in them or you somehow get to know them, they'll tell you what's interesting in the market. So you might even spend 5 of your investment checks in a market, kind of investing in just these amazing PhDs and geeks who are deep into something that nobody else is really into, but they're the world experts and they're obsessed with it. And then yeah, hopefully those investments do well as well, of course, but you get side benefits from an investment. You build a relationship with somebody, and so then you're starting, when the market starts to get to the point where you're productizing it, you can go back to them and say, hey, is there something really interesting here? And like they can keep you up to date on trends. And so he knows a lot of people in a lot of places that are up to date on trends. Naval also taught me basically everything I know about signaling. He thinks about that a lot, and we thought about it a lot at AngelList. So, like I said, ultimately, a single signal is trying to understand what people true motivations are versus what they say or show to you, and that can come into play in investing, where not just are you thinking, did A16Z invest, but is it a scout check? If it is, you have to understand that's a tiny check for them. And a lot of times it's like building a relationship with the scout more than it is building a relationship with the entrepreneur. Or is it a full-size check where they're going to definitely, it's like a significant part of their fund. So there's check sizing stuff. There's and you can bring that down to the syndicate lead. Are they investing a lot in this company, more than they normally do? Like you have to know their history a little bit to know if this is an unusual behavior for them, stuff like that. But you can also bring it to products, like I was talking about before, where your friends will tell you, yeah, it sounds like a good idea, but you stick an actual design in front of them, and you say, hey, I just want to watch you do your job. I want you to watch you do this, and you find out it's actually much more confusing than they thought, or like isn't really benefiting them, so they kind of forget about it. And that was one of the things with Quill that convinced us that we possibly had something there, is we gave Quill to a pretty small set of people back in October, mostly at that point just to make sure that the app didn't have bugs in it. But we noticed a month later the majority of them were still using it every single day, and we're like, yeah, people, that's not, at that point it's not just telling us that they like it, they're actually showing us that they're using it. So there's something real there. So So okay, so like stay on top of trends. Think about signaling and like back to the trends thing. Actually, it's like the big trends are always where geeks are spending their time. That's something that Naval thinks about. Where are like the real deep kind of geeky nerds, the things they do today that they're really excited about often do become big trends in the future. So early 90s, of course, people are in BBSs and like you think of them as antisocial and they're using this thing called the internet, but fast forward 8 years, every person in the world's on internet essentially, and like it's super important to business. Back when OpenAI was starting, not that many people they had a small team. Like people hadn't heard of Transformers. I think Transformers hadn't even been invented, but like Ilya wanted to spend his time building AGI and nobody thought that was possible. Give them a space to like figure out what's going on. And then 8 years later, sometimes that becomes a huge trend. Same with like Bitcoin in 2011. Who was mining Bitcoin? It was a bunch of weird individual people that just sort of thought it was fun. And later on, it became a big trend. And when it becomes a big trend, that's when things explode exponentially. And so, just like watching where people are having a good time, but on the frontiers of technology, will be an interesting place to see what happens over the following few years.
Amazing. Okay, so we're at the last part of the interview.
Yeah.
I have like 1 minute fire round for you. What's your favorite
Okay.
book?
A favorite book. Um, well, in the last couple of years, actually, I think the favorite book that I read for fun was called Delta V by Daniel Suarez. It's about asteroid mining, and actually, I just really love this combination of near-term science fiction and like this optimistic vision for realistically how humanity could go capture asteroids and like start to build a spacefaring civilization. I thought it was really good, um, and like fired up the imagination. Really made you want to go start a space company.
Uh, who made the biggest impact in your career?
In my career, I mean, combination of Naval, and then also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my wife Judy because she's always the second opinion that I need and like brings a different perspective to my career. And so we talk about everything.
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Who would I invite to a dinner party? Uh, yeah, a lot. When I basically friends who I think would have good conversations together. I just invited my friend Catherine Stewart this morning to and her husband because they've been good friends and like always have amazing perspectives on stuff. Um, I know that's not like it's not like a famous person answer, but I actually probably would have more fun with people that I know well.
Where can we find you outside of work?
Outside of work,
Yeah.
you said. These days I'm mostly working, so you can find me at home, where I'm probably doing a little bit of work. Yeah, sorry, I'm mostly working. I actually really enjoy the early stages of a startup.
Amazing. Okay, thank you so much, Michael, for coming on the show today.
Okay, all right, thank you.